Hello and welcome. This week is week 9, and as I travel from Arizona to California, so too does my 50-state ZenQuiltz journey travel to California. So go ahead and offer yourself gratitude and appreciation for allowing yourself this creative time as we begin our California quilt block. And thank you so much for joining me on this adventure, whether it be for just 1 week or all 50. Just know I appreciate you. So here's the visual of the tools that I had listed on that supply list at the beginning. I'm going to go ahead and move these all away until we get to that point. And all we need right now is our tile, ruler, and our pencil. And as always, we begin our tile with a 3/16 inch border all the way around. And this offers us a frame to begin building our quilt block details, and also offers us a symmetry to our quilt blocks so that when we put them all together at the end of this journey, um, again, we have some form of symmetry to the vision and also allows us a place to connect our tiles together without interfering with all of the beautiful artwork that is in the center of our quilt block. So connecting those hash marks side to side across your tile to once again just create that border. Right. So now that we have that border, we're going to only be measuring inside of that border, and every 12 and a half lines on our ruler, we're going to lay a hash mark. So every 12 and a half lines, we're going to lay a hash mark. And once we lay our half, we're not counting the half space that's left over as a half. We're going to start at that line and start with 1 again. So here's my 12 and a half, but I'm going to start at this line with 1. And it's okay. We're going to have just a little bit extra left over on the other side of our spacing, and it's all good. It always all comes together, right? So now we're going to take those hash marks and we're going to connect them side to side within our frame. So we're not going to go through the border with our extension lines, but rather we're just going to stay inside of that framework that we've just created. And we're going to create these 4 rows in the center of our tile. All right. And then once we have those 4 rows created, we're going to do exactly the same thing at the top and bottom so that we get a grid. So every 12 and a half lines on our ruler, so the space between 12 and 13, we're going to lay a little hash mark. And we're not going to count the half that's left over when we land as part of our count. We're just going to start back at 1 on that line. Then once we have those hash marks laid out again, we're going to turn our tile sideways and connect them with a horizontal line. So we're going to get this beautiful grid in the process. All right. So now that we have this grid, we're needing to divide these squares with an arch. So we're going to be creating a drunkard's path quilt block for California, um, entitled The Road to California. Yeah. So I did an entire series of A Drunkard's Path. So ZenQuiltz Series 2 was all about the drunkard's path. So we're not going to measure anything. We're just going to offer ourselves grace and try to make these arches as similar as possible. And you're just going to follow me so that you know how these curves are playing into each block. So I'm going to start right here on the first block, the top left block. And in that top left block, I'm going to turn my tile just so that it's easier. I'm going to add an arch across the corner, side to side. And that's my first arch. So I'm trying to keep the side space similar in width and arch across from hash to hash. So I laid kind of a little guideline hash just where I thought my lines were similar. That's as much thought as I'm putting into this. I'm not getting a ruler out. I'm not tracing a coin. I'm literally laying a hash mark on one side, a hash mark on the other side, and I'm going to say, yep, that's pretty similar. And then I'm going to connect those hash marks with an arch. Now, if we had material and we're cutting this, there is a tool specifically for this process. But our tool right now is Grace and a pencil. So just going through, adding these arches by kind of tick marking similar spaces and then arching across. So right there is our first row of our drunkard path blocks. Okay, so top right, bottom left, bottom right, bottom right. All right, so in the second row, we're going to do top right, and you're just using pencil, so you can manipulate this original line any amount of times as you'd like until that arch looks the way you like. Second block is bottom left. And in true Zentangle fashion, it always all works out. So stress not. We're not creating stress here. We're just offering ourselves grace and rolling. So second row, top right, bottom left, top left, top left. Okay, so go into that third row. We're going to start in the bottom right. And we're going to do that same bottom right again. Top right. And bottom left. So we have bottom right, top right, bottom left. It will all make sense when we're done. All right, so final row, adding those quarter circles or quarter orbs. I'm going to start in the top left. Top left. Top right. And bottom left. Okay. So here's a visual of all of the rows put together. Just take a moment and make sure that your arches match my arches. And then I'm going to take that kneaded eraser and I'm going to go ahead and take off the harshness of all of that pencil. So again, I need them, but I want them to kind of fall into the background and just offer me a ghostly guide as I begin laying the color down for California. So California's colors are blue and gold. Gold for the gold rush era and blue for their gorgeous blue skies. So I am going to start with my markers and my acetate. And my blender. All right, so I have my dark blue, light blue, and yellow markers and a blender as well. And I'm going to start with yellow just so that I have a bit more control over that lighter color going on and not having to avoid the blue in order to create green, right? We don't want any green in our gold and blue quilt for California. So I'm going to make sure that my blender is cleaned off from the last quilt that I did. And I'm going to start in this top left block. And I want the outside, not the quarter circle, but the outside material to be yellow. So I'm just gonna load up that blender, offer some of this beautiful gold yellow into the space. And however that yellow falls, I'm going to embrace. I'm going to allow those heavier spots to be the depth, and I'm going to allow the transparency of other spots to offer those highlights into the space. So I'm going to skip those two centers and I'm going to go over to the outside and once again add yellow to the square section, not to the quarter orb section. So just grabbing some marker off of my acetate palette, filling that space in, allowing the marker to fade off in the distance. Can always add more, very difficult to take away, right? So in the second row, I'm going to do the second box, and all of our yellow is going to be in the square section of our box, not the orb section of each box, right? So That second box is going to get some yellow, as well as the third box. So if you're looking right now at the camera saying, "Ugh, such sloppy coloring," I'm not concerned about making these real smooth, beautiful palettes on my tile. I want the texture of those dark and light spots to truly have a voice, because once I add my tangling, that all plays in to the appearance of the material. And I really appreciate that dynamic of texture when in fact it's really just how our ink was laid. And if you would rather just go directly to your tile with your marker, it's always an option too. I like to just be able to kind of have a bit more control and offer more if I want more and be able to tone it back if I don't. So there's our third row. And in the fourth row, we're going to go to those corners, those edges. So each of the corner boxes is going to get yellow in that square section, representing the gold of our blue and gold state colors, honoring that gold rush. So many possibilities to pull from in California. Yeah, fun. All right, I'm going to clean off my blender and I'm going to go into that dark blue. So again, I'm going to lay that palette of dark blue right onto my acetate. And when I pull this dark blue could really get away from me rather quickly. And I want to be able to see my tangles in it. So I'm going to take that dark blue and pull it off further onto my acetate. So I'm not getting a real concentrated expression uh, of that dark blue, so that I still have, yes, those dark, heavy spots of more saturated color, but I also have it blending out to almost a watery kind of almost see-through color, right? So that will again help with the depth of our tangles, and it will allow us to see the details of our tangles as well. So you can always add more, much more difficult, if not impossible, to peel away the layers of that color. So we're going to go to the corners of each of our yellow sections. So the corners of our block, where the corner sections come together, that's where this dark blue is going into each one of these spaces. So we're not going to do the dark blue into every quarter orb, only into the outside band. So all the quarter circles in that outside band is where we're adding that dark blue. All right, I'm going to clean off that blender. And now I'm going to that light blue, that 451 that I've pulled. And in every open space, I'm going to add that light blue. So everything that's white right now is going to get this beautiful light blue background. Each state is so uniquely different, and each vision is its own with its each unique quilt layout and the tangles that we're offering it. But as we put these blocks all together to create that vision of all of our 50 states coming together, if you're in fact going to be somehow bringing them all together in one visual piece, I'm always using similar or at least a similar color week to week that ties in somehow the big picture, right? So we've used this light blue as a neutral a lot along the way so far in the, 9 weeks of quilts that we've done. And yellow seems to be the neutral that I've chosen to also kind of tie our visions together. But when we look at each individual state, even though our colors may tie together, each one definitely has a very unique expression. So it's not at all confusing as to, what state is what. Yes, colors are uniting it together. But as we add the tangles that are specific to each state, gosh, I'm having so much fun doing that and pulling tangles that try to make sense to the overall vision. Or maybe not overall vision, but overall state favorites and things that define that state. I hope as you look at the tiles, you can begin to see the uniqueness that each state quilt block offers us in the overall picture. Where's California going to take us? Well, we right now know that this drunkard's pathway is our road to California. So I'm going to take that light blue and I'm going to go right into the corners of my border with that light blue. And I'm going to go direct. I'm not going to blend this, but I'm rather just going to let this speak in full saturation. I'm going to take the dark blue and I'm going to use that dark blue on those larger sections. Just filling that whole space directly with the ink of the marker. And once you have that whole quilt block done, you're going to take that marker right to the edge of that tile so that we can eliminate any of those white deckled edges on the side of our quilt, making sure that when we piece these pieces together later on in our journey, we don't have white in between our blocks, but rather our material wraps all the way around each of our tiles. Yeah. So I'm going to go to my light gray to create our tangling this week. And the first tangle that we're going to do is inside of our yellow spaces. So the tangle that I'm going to offer into those yellow spaces is called suspenders. So suspenders arches from corner to corner. And we're going to aura that first arch thinly until we run out of space. The thinner you make those auras, the more impact this tangle has. Now, in all fairness, this impact will be lost a little bit because we're having to use our go behind on this tangle, but neither here nor there, it will still be a visual impact. So suspenders is actually inspired by the Brooklyn Bridge, but we're going to use it for the Golden Gate Bridge. Yeah. So once we have all of those arid lines or arches to the pinch of the rest of that space, I'm going to turn my tile and visualize that we're going to arch from this corner to this corner. However, we're not going to go through because this is a different material. So our blue begins a different material. So how we're cutting our yellow material, the pattern is going to get cut off. So arching from this corner to this corner, but stopping when you get to the blue. And then we're going to do the same thing. Thinly aura until you run out of space. So if we had a whole block to do this in, you would see these wires or suspenders of the bridge overlapping and intertwining here that come up to a peak, right? So visualize this coming over and having free lines over here, right? So something to kind of play with inside of a block so you can see the actual tangle. But here we go. All the yellow spaces are going to get these suspenders. So corner to corner, we're going to arch. And then we're going to deliberately and intentionally, very mindfully create these thin auras. All stacked on top of each other until we run out of space. Then we're going to turn our tile so that our next arch that would go from corner to corner intersects the lines we already have laid. And we're going to stop when we get to that blue quarter orb, because that's a completely different material. So fun creating our own fabric to build these quilts on. So there's our suspenders, right? Turning your tile so that your first arch doesn't mirror but goes above that quarter orb inside of that square. So this is our Golden Gate Bridge on top of our golden material. Don't rush the process, just enjoy each one of those thin auras falling out the tip of your pen so beautifully. Taking your time, remembering to breathe, dropping those shoulders down away from your ears, just relaxing. This is the Zentangle magic right here. This repetition. Our hand just knows what to do. It's where our heart slows down. It's where our breath slows down. It's where our mind quiets. Suspenders. All right. So, what else is California about? Well, we know, of course, they have beautiful beaches and water, sunshine, all of that beautiful stuff. But how do you encompass that all in one tangle? Well, I kind of stumbled upon Aquaflor, and you think, Aquaflor, what does it have anything to do with the ocean and the sun? What does that have anything to do with California? Well, Maria's description of Aquaflor when she thought of this tangle is movement like the waves, drama like the sunsets, shapes like the flora, and passion. Well, if that doesn't describe California in a nutshell, I know nothing. So, Aquaflor is where we're headed to these dark blue sections. So, Aquaflor begins with a wavy line. And from that wavy line, we're going to start in the pinch of this triangular shape, and we're going to add a line that wraps around the top of that string line that we've just created. And then we're going to pull another one right out of that center, right out of that valley. And we're going to continue to do so, wrapping in pairs as much as we can. And it's okay if we have a stranded line because we want to fill that whole space. So we have these lines that pull from the center, always out of the same place, that wrap right around our line. Now we're going to take those lines that we've wrapped around the top and we're going to pull backwards to create a ribbon. So if you have pairs, you're going to have those pairs come together to create one ribbon that kind of diminishes in size back to that point. This is a go behind, so we've cut our material right here on this ribbon as well as this ribbon. So now that we have our ribbon connected, we're going to go ahead and offer some ink or drama into each one of those ribbons. Now I'm going to choose to leave a little bit of a sparkle or highlight into that inking so that my background material, that blue, shines through. So I'm just going to ink this space. Again, leaving a little bit of a space between the top and bottom ribbon so that I create by default this sparkle or highlight right into that space. So there's our Aquaflor. I'm going to do that in each one of the dark blue sections. So I'm just going to begin with a wavy line, however that comes from your pen, starting in the valley of that triangular shape. I'm going to start adding these lines with hooks on the end of them. Working in pairs as much as I can till I get to the other side where I have my material cutting off. Pulling back to pair up any ribbons that I can pair up or any lines that I can pair up into that ribbon. And then inking. And again, I'm choosing to not ink top to bottom, but rather leave a little bit of a space or a sparkle into that ribbon to just offer a highlight of that background color. In all of the years that I've used Aquaflor as a tangle, I never really knew how profound the meaning of Aquaflor was. So I really am glad that I can look at it in a more in-depth way than just wrapped ribbons. So you see what happens when we get both sides of those quarter orbs completed? We almost have this bow tie that's happening into this vision. Yeah, fun. There we have our Aquaflor, our waves, our flora, our sunsets, our passion. California in one tangle. Oh, but is it really? Because we have all of this beautiful background space. And what a better place to express California in a fun, lighthearted way than right there through the Tangle Lego. So Lego begins with rows and rows of small little orbs. Think of Lego pieces. So we're going to build the faces of our Legos into these spaces, one orb at a time. So, of course, Legos are for Legoland. And again, I know, where do you begin with inspiration in California? So when you find a tangle that just fits so perfectly, you roll with it because the possibilities are endless in the directions that you could possibly go in California. So this is just a light-hearted, fun way to add texture into the background of our Golden Gate and our waves and sunset, all the inspirational, beautiful pieces, but just offers a texture to that background so that our space is, our quilt has more of a story, right? And our space is filled with meaning and not just any random tangle that is a filler and doesn't mean anything. So I thought it was a fun way to bring in another element. Just rows and rows of tiny orbs, trying to keep the rows similar in height as you cross over the plane to another block. So now that we have all of our orbs laid, we need to create our blocks, our Lego blocks. So ideally, what we're trying to do or accomplish is to make these look like Legos. So we want to make sure that we have the amount of dots on each block as a Lego would have. So think even numbers, right? I think that it's 4, 6, 8, 2. But anyway, so you're building your Lego blocks right now. So you're just going to divide these spaces as you see them, not forgetting your string lines because that's a divider block, right? So you want your string lines to also be divided. As you go through building or laying out these blocks. So fun. Through this process, I've definitely found a lot of tingles um, that I didn't know existed, which has been super fun. This being one of them. I'm not sure that it would ever really come into play with me for anything else that I'd be doing, but it sure was the perfect match for California. There's our Legos for Legoland. Do you want to hear a strange fact that California is known for? Or actually, I guess I should say a strange food that California is known for. And maybe I shouldn't say it's strange because I've never tasted it. It might be fantastic. It probably is if it's a thing, right? Um, but anyway, sorry, I digress. Garlic ice cream. Wonder if I'm going to have some while I'm there. Anyway, we're off to stitching. So I'm going to grab um, my dark gray ink, my Micron number 44, and I'm going to start stitching. And it's in this so slow, deliberate stroke of pen stitching that we really find that place, that zen. Try to enjoy the process. Don't rush the process. It's okay to take your time. And as we get to each piece of material in this process, and we stitch on both sides of each piece, right? Because each piece needs to be sewn to the next. It's not just one line of stitching, but two lines of stitching on either side, bringing all of the pieces of material together. As we do this process slowly and deliberately with intention, be mindful of how those stitches are coming together for you, trying to avoid those wispy tails out the back of your stitch because you were working too quickly. There's no way to speed up the process of pushing your yarn, or I'm sorry, your thread up and down, up and down. So be mindful. Enjoy the steps that it's taking us to get to the end result of this quilt block. Short, staccato little pen marks representing each piece of thread, holding every layer of that quilt together. With each week, I have such a fond appreciation to the real quilters out there using a needle and thread, using a scissors to cut each one of these shapes so meticulously that there's a symmetry to the overall vision when you're done. The way we offered ourselves grace in creating these arches in our squares, no quilter would ever do. It's such a meticulous, exact art. I appreciate you and your patience. Give yourself that breath. Check in on those shoulders. Them down away from your ears. Maybe unhinge that jaw. Maybe allow the corners of your mouth to bend upward and offer yourself a smile, immediately releasing any tension in your face. Yeah. It's amazing what a smile can do, even when it's just to yourself. Go ahead and stitch that outer border as well. Again, we have that dark blue border that we may or may not readily see that stitch work, but we'll know it's there. So just go ahead and take the time and stitch that edging all around our block. Feel as though we should definitely be able to ooh and ah over California coming together. We have our colored pencils that we're going to offer that shading or that depth to right into each patch. Again, not focusing on the tangle itself, but rather right around the edge. So I'm going to take that 917, that golden yellow, and right around the stitch work of each one of those yellow patches, just offer that depth. So the color that I chose to add the depth to this for this state is very similar to the color of our marker. But again, if you change your perspective, hold your tile out at arm's length, you'll see where we've been and where we've not. I could have chosen to use that darker goldenrod that's already in our palette to offer a bit more depth, but because we're wanting that beautiful gold for the gold rush, I didn't want to tone it down. I'd rather have it be bright and bold, but always an option if this just doesn't speak to you and it is a bit too, again, bright and bold for what your vision was. Totally an option to tone it down with that goldenrod. It's already in our palette of tools. But I'm really liking how this gold just shines with this depth right around that pucker, that stitching. All right, I'm going to go to that 1088, same thing, right on that stitching line, circular motion, adding that depth to the edges where that stitching occurs, where those puckers from going in and out of the material and layers causes that ever so slight kind of dimple or pucker to the fabric. That's what we're highlighting. That's what we're um, allowing to represent our shadows for or our depth for, so that as those puckers or dimples occur, the poof that happens in the middle of those sections or those patches is highlighted just from the material being kind of poofed out or picked up from the different layers below. So that's our goal in doing this. And that circular motion offers you a bit more of a gradation of shading than just going back and forth with that color. Kind of offers the ability to tone it down in just one smooth move, as opposed to layering back and forth, of not being able to really blend out those harsh lines created. Such a subtle, ever so slight addition of color, but it has such a great impact. And you'll know if you've missed a spot when you change your perspective and hold that tile out. That spot that you've missed will definitely have a different voice than the patches that you've already added that dimension to. Yeah. One more detail in that 105, right into that aquaphor again, focusing right on that sewn edge, not focusing on the individual tangles, but rather where those threads come in and out each layer. Ooh. Ah. There is our California. So thank you so much for meeting me in California. Go ahead, offer yourself gratitude and appreciation for allowing yourself this time. Find your top, add your chop or your signature, however you show love to your masterpiece. And until next time, thank you so much.